Mira'm bé, look at me well. Once again in my life, in our lives, the time had come to change residence again and adapt to a new place, a new way of life, and even a new language, Catalan. My children will be the ones who will suffer the most and will have to adapt to the change, because in addition to a new place to live, they will have to go to a new school where education will be taught in Catalan, absolutely, and not in Spanish as before. By 1997, we were all in a village 25 kilometers from Boitaúl called Pont de Suert. Pont de Suert is a beautiful town in the Pyrenees of Lleida, located before reaching Boitaúl. It's not very big, but it has basically what it takes to live. So we obtained a flat for rent that was, and I suppose it still is, at the entrance of the town coming from Zaragoza. Carlos went to work from there every morning and did not return until the evening, and many days well into the night. The kids and I will stay there all day. I did take them to school in the morning, pick them up for lunch, and came back 2 or 3 more hours to school in the afternoon. Meanwhile, I spent the day alone in that house, unknown to me, furnished with belongings that were not mine, and trying to make it feel like our home, although I never felt that way, and somehow neither did my children. At that time, we also suffered the loss of my father-in-law, Colas, who, after struggling and suffering a lot with a long disease for years, ended up passing away. I remember that we had to leave urgently one night for San Sebastian after receiving the sad news, so that we could be there in the morning and go to the funeral. After some time in Pont de Suert, we were granted an apartment in the resort where Carlos worked. That way we were supposed to spend more time together, although at the same time that made my husband much more tied to work, no matter the time of the day. The children had to continue going to school, which was made possible by a school transport bus that covered the 25 kilometers from Boitaúl to Pont de Suert. Through one of the workers at the reception of the main hotel, I made friends with his wife, who came to spend time with him, as the residence was in El Prat de Llobregat in Barcelona. This worker was called Demetrio, and his wife Dami. She was a great support in those lonely days and in later times when, without her help, everything would have been more difficult. She was the first to know about my loneliness in that place and the neglect in the relationship of the part of my husband, who was absorbed more and more by his work every day. There was rarely time for the kids or me, and when there was, it was tremendously limited and full of interruptions. We celebrated Christmas dinner in the hotel all the time, at the restaurant, because that way he could control everything that happened there or in the kitchen. In this way, dinner was a constant receiving messages with problems, getting up every now and then, or attending to an annoying customer. I'm sorry to say, but even though I tried to be the understanding wife who understood the responsibilities that his position brought with it, and to be patient, it all began to undermine our relationship. I began to see that the children and I had taken the back seat. I started working in a small shop that was located in the resort, so as not to spend the days alone and to get a small salary. I also thought that it would be easier to enjoy my husband's company that way. We managed to eat together some days, and little else, always in a hurry. Although I didn't speak Catalan, I came to understand it almost completely, and to this day I haven't forgotten it, and I learned to love that language, especially in songs. There I met some Catalan music groups as they were heard on the radio and in the pub disco of the hotel complex where we sometimes went. Among them was one that in those days was beginning to emerge with quality music, and that ended up rising as one of the best musical groups in Spain without taking long, Jarabe de Palo. They were from nearby, and their leader was a boy called Pau Donés, who unfortunately died not long ago after a long battle with cancer. Also, others such as Gossos, that means dogs in Catalan, or Sau, as well as many songs by Joan Manuel Serrat, went on to fill my playlist of favorite songs. And today they still bring back memories of that wonderful place that is the whole area of the Catalan Pyrenees. Her songs sent messages to my soul that translated what I was feeling then and cradled my sadness. At some point, in a very specific one, the children and I decided that it was time to return to our home in Zaragoza, even if Carlos remained in the distance. Two events were the trigger for our return. One was the fact that my children were having a very hard time at school. They did not adapt, especially to the language that was imposed on them, and that at one point caused Aitor a slap from one of his teachers, with a ring mark included on his little face, all for not answering in Catalan to what she asked him for. The other was a particular day that began to break my marriage, my heart, and dried up my efforts to support the relationship. It was one afternoon when I met Carlos for a coffee because we hardly saw each other, and when we were sitting there on the terrace of the hotel enjoying our company, one of his boss colleagues appeared, who came to our table to comment on some problem, and after my husband told me, "I'll be right back," they went a few meters away where I could not hear them, and there they were talking for about 1 hour. I sat there with my coffee, ignored, forgotten, and with no hope of ending the afternoon with my husband. When he returned to the table for barely 1 minute, large tears ran down my cheek, and he asked me what was wrong. That did upset me even more. There was not even an apology, neither from him nor from the other person. He simply told me that he had to leave because there were problems. And there I stayed, forsaken and with the certainty that I will no longer remain in that place. So, on one of those days, I told him that the children and I were returning to Zaragoza, because the situation was already unsustainable for them at school and for me there. And in that way, I exchanged the accompanied solitude of the Pyrenees for the solitude with my children in Zaragoza. And so, the descent began towards an end that had been announced and that no one wanted to see.